Hi, I'm Terri Murphy for the Data Advocate today, here with Saul Klein, expert on all things data. He goes back to the early days of technology, and we know that we used to say in the Code of Ethics, under all is the land, but today it's under all is the data that supports land and the great American dream of home ownership. Welcome, Saul Klein.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Great to talk to you about data, actually about just about anything that comes up, because this is our show. We can talk about anything that we want. And you're right. I think today, a little piece about data and a little piece maybe about inflation and interest rates and where the real estate market's going and how to be prepared for things maybe that you can't be prepared for. And then there's a recent court decision in the area of antitrust that's of interest. And so that's something we should throw out there this week and let people chew on.
Well, there's so much that's happening in real estate. We know that the industry is being transformed and fast. There's lots of disintermediation going on. There's lots of changes. The consumer is driving a lot of that demand, but under all of it is the fact that housing is an issue. If you talk to anybody in real estate today, inventory seems to be a challenge. Not that there's less, but that it's going faster than ever because people want the American dream. Talk to us a little bit about how inflation is impacting home buying today.
Well, so the inflation, a lot of different things cause inflation, a couple different types of inflation, but the one that I think we need to keep our eye on in real estate is this whole idea. It's an old idea of when there's more buying power, that creates more demand. And when there's more demand, if you have a diminished supply, it's going to drive prices up.
Well, we know that there's been home appreciation to the tune of about 17 or 18% across the board.
Yeah.
Obviously, in some places, way more than that.
Right. So we look around and we see, inflation. So we see prices going up. We see, inflation. Yeah, that makes sense. Those two kind of go together. As a matter of fact, the other day I was walking up my driveway. I'm thinking to myself, I'm walking up the driveway in this house that Janie paid $19,000 for. And I'm looking at the house. I'm thinking, I live in $1 million house. Now,
actually more than $1 million.
Yeah,
it's probably about $1.3 million.
I'm thinking, but I know the inside story here. The inside story is it was a $19,000 house. Maybe it had some room additions and different things, but maybe it's like $60,000, but $1 million. And as a matter of fact, once the different improvements are made, the house goes down and actually gets worn out. Actually, there's real wear and tear and depreciation.
Functional obsolescence.
Yep. But yet it's $1 million house. What made that happen? And the answer is inflation. And so during inflationary periods, people want to be in what we call equity assets. This is one of those periods of time for a lot of different reasons. And one thing for sure, we know a lot of money's been pumped into the economy and is being pumped into the economy. And we say that one of the causes of inflation is, too much money chasing too few goods. And so if people have more spending power, then they're going to want the goods that are available, and that drives the prices up. And so the Federal Reserve, charged with kind of curbing inflation, how do they do it? They try to take some of the heat out of the market. How do they do that? They make it harder for people to spend. They make it harder for people to borrow. So the tool that the Fed utilizes most often to control inflation is to be able to change the money, make it harder for people to borrow. And so that's why in the real estate space now, that's what we're seeing. Interest rates are going up. They're 3, 4, 5.
And that doesn't, yeah, I mean, you and I both know because we were around when it was way, way, way higher than that. But even a half a point over a period of time on a house can cost an extra $80,000, $100,000 over the life of the mortgage.
Well, you're right. That's why it's so important today for kind of, while realtors can't predict what's going to happen, it's easy to kind of see, well, if there's inflation, how is inflation combated? Answer, higher interest rates. So if you think there's going to be more inflation, you got to think there's going to be higher interest rates. Every time the interest rate ticks up, you were on the right track. I interrupted you. Every time the interest rate ticks up a little bit, that means X number of people fall out of the buy. They can't buy. Boom.
Exactly.
Right there. Those people by the wayside. Those people by the wayside. And at the same time, as when we're in a period where interest rates are fairly stable, low or fairly stable, when interest rates start to move up, it creates an urgency. You know this, we've seen this. And so at a time when you think people would stop borrowing, they all rush into the door. And so the rates go up and people say, oh, you know what's going to happen? It's going to slow the market down. Eventually it does. Eventually it slows the market. And when that happens, the supply starts to go up. And you start, right? So, but that takes the Fed cranking on and raising interest rates. And so you're right. What does that mean over the life of a property? Does that mean it's not a good time to buy property? Well, I think again,
Yeah. I mean, right now, when you look at the statistics and the metrics for rent increase over the last 40 years, it went up 17%. NAR just posted that it went up 17 or 18% this year alone.
so,
That's unprecedented for rent.
yeah. So now we're getting to, are we going to turn into a renter nation? Because housing affordability, that gets into another conversation, which is the NIMBY conversation, which gets into another conversation, which is higher density, walkability, housing affordability, right? And those are the things that we're going to be talking about at the Data Advocate. You know, as you take that word inflation and you can inflate from there, right? You can talk about all these different things that we're going to be talking about on a regular basis. But I think today, really relevant to talk about inflation.
Oh, totally. I just, because I know that there was an acronym you just used that most people are not aware of. You said NIMBYism. Why don't you just explain really what that means so that we can keep people informed?
Yeah, NIMBY, not in my backyard. And so people want more facilities, but they just don't want it close to them. And so in real estate, we have a property, a person can own a piece of property zoned for a specific reason. And somebody they might want to then build what the land's been zoned for and have the neighbors all get together and say, we don't want it, not in my backyard. And that restricts growth. And so we have all these things that restrict growth and that drive the cost of building units, living units up. And so affordability is a major issue. And one of the reasons is that people, they want more housing, but they don't want the 10-story apartment building next to them.
Right.
Not, not in my backyard. But you get to the point now, and this part of this is generational, and we've been talking about this, and that is that certain people actually like walkable communities, millennials in particular. And that we're going to see more efficient uses of mass transit as we move into the future and start to better utilize the land, because the better utilization of the land is going to help us solve the greatest social problems of the day. And we're going to be able to do that by the data and what we can do with all the data. But right now, people need to be thinking about, should I buy real estate and should I not buy real estate? And this is an inflationary market. So I would say, if you can, it's a good idea. Interest rates are still low. People say there might be a crash. Real estate's always been, for me, a long-term investment.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I think if you're looking to flip, you can get into some trouble just because we just never know how the market's going to change. Remember, it's just like the stock market. It just doesn't change as violently fast. But that said, home ownership, I mean, you talked about your wife, Janie, buying the house for $19,000, which sounds ridiculous. Of course, $19,000 when she bought it was probably still a lot of money. But it's the one investment that we have that works on our behalf, because you've got depreciation, appreciation, you've got a place to live. I would say home ownership is the whole key behind the Data Advocate. We're trying to get more people into home ownership because you talked about the social changes that go with that.
Well, everybody should have the opportunity to own a home, right? That's it's the foundation of generational wealth, right? For just about everybody. If you can get into a home, you actually have an opportunity or putting forth a better life for your posterity just because you bought that house, right?
Not to even mention the community, because you and I have discussed with John Riley, our other partner, about how the community is stabilized when people have a skin in the game, which is ownership.
Yeah. Transportation, being around transportation, owning a piece of the pie. A lot of new solutions. We're seeing public-private partnerships that we saw years ago. We're here to talk of that kind of thing again. So real estate's a great equity asset. The time to own real estate is now, long-term. Interest rates haven't peaked yet. And there's lots going on. Hey, it's great to be able to talk about this.
Well, and I hope you'll join us again for other segments, because the Data Advocate is all about real estate and land use, some of the new things that are happening with zoning, walkability, as you talk, transferability, how it impacts the community, the whole technology behind how we can predict living and municipality needs for a community, and all the resources that we have. What's the best way to reach the Data Advocate or to follow us?
I think if you just go to thedataadvocate.com, you can sign up right there, and lots of new content every day.
Thanks so much for joining us, Saul Klein. I'm Terri Murphy with the Data Advocate. Join us there at thedataadvocate.com for more information and updates, newsletters, and resources you can use to live the American dream.